As promised, here's my Candida diet journey. The pieces of my story are scattered all over my blog in different articles, and I've shared bits and pieces here and there on YouTube and on Instagram stories, but nothing really compressed together. So I tried to make this video as concise as possible to give you the greatest value. Basically, I'm going to pick up where I left off in my previous video, where I shared my story to transitioning to whole food plant-based diet. Definitely go back and watch that video to get the full picture. So there was successfully transitioned to whole food plant-based diet with all those benefits, which you can learn from the previous video. When at some point off the top of my head, it must have been around 2014, so 2 years after transitioning, when I started to have symptoms. First and foremost, I had itching down there. Now, most of my lady clients experience the same symptom, some more, some less. Secondly, hypoglycemic episodes. Hypoglycemia is when your blood sugar levels fall below normal, and this can result in a variety of symptoms. In my case, it was feeling nearly fainted and trembling of my hands. Next, sinusitis. It was so bad in 2016 that I had to take a round of antibiotics, and I've had overall problems with sinuses, congestions and whatnot. Hay fever. Now, I had never had hay fever before. The first time I remember was 2014, and the doctors would tell me that this can occur after pregnancy. Well, I had given birth 2 years prior. Frequent upper respiratory infections. I recall being sick or almost sick throughout the winter 2015-16, our last year in Barcelona. And to add insult to injury, I also picked up a pretty nasty influenza that spring. My whole family was down and my husband never gets sick. It must have been the fact that we weren't accustomed to the flu strains in Spain. Even so, we fought it off, and I was the only one needing antibiotics due to my sinus infection. Then there was some bloating, and finally, the most inconvenient symptom were the cracks in the corners of my mouth. Usually there was one crack at a time, and as soon as it would heal, the other one would crack. It was hell, really. If you add up the itching, painful cracks that made eating a torture, hypoglycemic episodes, bloating, and feeling under the weather in general, I knew I had to go back to the drawing board, well, almost, as far as eating was concerned. In hindsight, all those accumulating symptoms were a blessing in disguise, really, because if it was just 1 or 2 slightly inconvenient matters, who knows, I might have postponed any actions even further. A side note, if you didn't know, I have put together a massive free guide to Candida overgrowth, which you can download from my website. I'll provide the link in the description box. Most women know that if you have itching down there, it's probably yeast infection. However, if it's locally manageable and there are no other concerns, you might turn a blind eye for ages until you finally develop other ailments. It calls to my mind that already in 2014, when I discussed the issue with my friend who was studying to become a nutritionist, she warned me against not taking any actions if I didn't want to deal with more serious outcome. So I already knew then, but I was basically hiding my head in the sand. Nevertheless, I suspected it was Candida overgrowth, but I started to be more preoccupied only after noticing that when I managed to keep my blood sugar stable, even if it was just for 1 day, it would significantly reduce the itching, and also the corners of my mouth would start to heal. Furthermore, I tried a salve with antifungal properties, and it really worked wonders on the cracks. This was it. I was convinced of what needs to be done, but the question how remained. Before I get on with the how, I need to address the why. As I already mentioned in my previous video, I screwed up even on whole food plant-based diet. Now, my take is that I started to eat too much high glycemic foods, such as dried fruits, sweet fruits, and baked goods made of flours. My mornings would start with sweet smoothie, followed by a flour-based muffin sweetened with dried fruits or bananas. Now, this is why I would get the blood sugar spikes, resulting in hypoglycemic episodes later on, triggering me to eat even more sweet stuff to balance out the blood sugar. If you've been following me for a while, then you might have noticed that all my muffins and bakes are made with soaked whole grains, often even sprouted, as opposed to flours, and this is to diminish the glycemic load of grains. If you are interested in more info on low glycemic diet, I have written a thorough blog post and I will link it below in the description box. To make a long story short, I was constantly on a blood sugar roller coaster, which ultimately contributed to the worsening of my other symptoms. In addition, I had history with antibiotics. I swallowed them numerous times throughout my teenage years. The first time I had sinusitis was when I was 12 or 13. I was even hospitalized and I had to have my sinuses surgically drained 2 times. Now, back in those days in Soviet Union, this was done with local anesthesia and it hurt like hell. I remember smaller children being tied to a chair for the procedure while screaming like a banshee. Let's move on to the how. I knew I definitely wanted to continue eating whole food plant-based, so the research began. When I conducted my research, I came across a few books that go really deep into Candida overgrowth. One of those resources is also available in different languages, so I link both below. I was able to gather together the principles of Candida diet, but what I failed to encounter was a plant-based meal plan. Now, this is when I started a massive meal plan compiling once again. Remember, the first time was when I was transitioning to whole food plant-based diet. Obviously, I followed the meal plans and it started to make a difference. I really had hit the nail on the head. The first results came pretty quickly. Within a week, there was almost no itching. I stayed on the cleanse for almost 3 months, and then I started to reintroduce starchy veggies, legumes, and berries. I assume I went without fruits for almost 6 months, if not 7. I'm sure many of you might start to wonder, how's this even humanly possible? How can you deprive yourself from so many yummy foods for so long? The answer is simple, really. Your health is the most important thing you have. And once you realize that, there is no turning back. Every symptom that disappears is like a prize you don't want to give up. You might think that you deserve that piece of cake. Or you also might think that you deserve to be healthy. I obviously prefer the latter. Besides, human being is a creature of habits. It's simply a matter of creating new, healthier ones. It's so easy, really, if you replace your old habit with a new, healthy and enjoyable one. Go and check out my recipes if you don't believe that healthy can be darn delicious. Now, should you be interested to learn more about my plant-based Candida diet meal plans that I've so carefully put together, go and watch my video explaining my vegan Candida diet meal plans, or go straight to my website through the links I will provide in the description box. I hope you found value in my story, and if you like what I do, I'd love to see you subscribing, commenting and liking.